It's the last day at the Diamond Open Access here at UCT, and we also managed to get the NRF Board Chair, also the Vice-Chancellor at UCT. But as usual, I'll allow Prof to introduce himself. Prof, can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Mosa Moshabela, and I'm the Vice Chancellor here at UCT and also the Chair of the board at the National Research Foundation.
So, Prof, a lot of open access decolonization, a lot on open science as well. What does this mean for you?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. I think the most important thing is that when you're thinking of open access here, it's the idea that in publishing, the costs have gone really high. And they've become a barrier for a lot of people who don't have the financial capital to access and disseminate science in those commercialized industry of and of journals and so forth. And those journals come with a lot of prestige and visibility, but they're exclusive. Also, most of them are presented in English, and they exclude a lot of groups that use alternative languages, other languages from their own countries. So a lot of people from Asia, from Latin America, on the continent, they use Portuguese, they use French, and they are not really able to participate in that dominant discourse. So the idea is, how do we actually try to open up the space? How do we take a new approach to publishing, like the Diamond Open Access,
Yes.
that becomes more inclusive, that becomes more multilingual, that becomes more geographically representative, that limits the cost on the person who's publishing, who's trying to publish, and the person who's supposed to read the article, so that all of the science can become accessible for everyone to use and to benefit from in society. That's why an aspect of it really has to do with the decolonial approaches, because most of the sort of gold publishing that is commercial, they are legacies of that colonial era that we've been bound by for a long time, where they set the standards, they set the rules, and as a result, a lot of people were excluded from that. Now, this is not to say that the sort of commercial industry doesn't have a place, but it's important that it recognizes its limitation. It recognizes the role that it plays in the ecosystem. But we must also create a broader space where everyone else who does not have access into that commercial industry can still be able to advance science as a public good. Of course, all knowledge should be accessible, should be public good, but we understand we live in an entrepreneurial world. We live in a world where people will look for market share and so forth, and corporatize and commercialize. But I think it's also important that that commercialization does not limit access and does not really hinder or perpetuate the marginalization of those that are already and have always been at the margins of knowledge production and benefit.
Okay, so in your panel discussion, you said something that actually got attention of the room when you were demonstrating how we should also consider the ecosystem, also how things are moving given that the government is funding certain things. So I think I would like you to also share with our listeners now that what you just shared earlier during the panel discussion.
Yeah, it's the idea that we're talking about publishing and we're talking about journals and their rankings, the costs, visibility, prestige, and so forth. But you have to understand that whole business and that whole enterprise in the context of the people who produce knowledge, that they also have the freedom to decide where they're going to submit their journals. And these are the scientists. Most of them are in research councils, institutes, centers, units. Most of them are in universities. So you've got to include them in the conversation and then think about what are the things that drive their behavior, the incentives, and how to accommodate them. And also think about the behavior of the universities, because these universities also set the rules, they set the direction, institutional policies. We influence the behavior of the academics. our behavior is also influenced by government, Department of Higher Education and Training, Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. They influence the behavior of universities, including how we are incentivized by government for publication or knowledge production and so forth. And they are influenced by the laws in the country, and we're all part of this whole ecosystem.
Yes.
And we then have to say, what is it that we value? If we value the commercial industry of publishing as an ecosystem, parliament, government, universities, knowledge producers, scientists, researchers, if we all value the commercial industry, then that's where we're going to go. But if we decide as an ecosystem that there's a place, there's a value proposition we see in open access, in open science, in this sort of non-commercial enterprise of publishing, then we can begin to change our rules and policies to fit and absorb, accommodate that and participate in it, especially because it does call for inclusion, it calls for multilingualism, it calls for dignity, it calls for making sure that people benefit from science in communities. For co-creation, we value other forms of knowledge production and contributions that are not necessarily the sort of historical methods or approaches, or traditional methods or approaches, or conventional methods or approaches. We've got to create new ways. And if we value that, then let's work collectively as an ecosystem to achieve that.
Yeah. So my last question will be, you touched a little bit on employment, innovation, including researchers in these meetings. But also I'm asking that for you as a Vice Chancellor of UCT and the board chair of the NRF, how is the way forward looking like? How are you going to do this? I know you said we should do it slowly. We should not go hard on it, but what does this slowly look like for you?
Yeah. So I think for me, I understand the call to action that the summit is putting forward, but really I think the thing that stands out for me is the opportunity for the summit to come up with a value proposition for non-commercial publishing, for Diamond Open Access, a value proposition that many of us in the ecosystem can identify with, and so that we know that we are also part of the movement and of the transformation that is happening, of the new path and new opportunities that are being opened up. That value proposition will play an important role in inviting us to the table to participate. The participation will lead to us understanding what needs to be done, making decisions in that direction, coming up with new rules and new policies. And I think most importantly, one value proposition that is, I think, very important and timely for us as universities, as UCT, as the NRF, as South Africa, is the notion of societal impact and social impact. The NRF has just produced recently produced the societal impact framework, social impact framework. And that framework needs to be operationalized. For the first time at the NRF Awards, we had categories that included social impact. It is an effort to try to work towards the implementation of that impact framework. And I think that Diamond can play an important role in helping drive that agenda, and the NRF can also look at open science and open access as a way to make concrete, make real, make pragmatic this whole process of turning the framework around societal impact and social impact into reality. It's hard to do that in the commercial industry that is established with the rules that it has. But the rules in open access are flexible enough for the NRF and for all of us to incorporate these new ideas of assessment and measurement, including qualitative co-creation, including quantitative new metrics that we could explore. And someone said it very well, that many of those measures are going to be very contextual. So they require some flexibility to allow each context to shape what they believe is impact in their environment based on our value system, based on our culture, based on our reality, our economic situation, needs, and so forth, our laws and policy priorities, then we can do that. And I think open access can allow for us to achieve that.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your time. Any last words?
Well, I
Highlights?
just want to, thank the NRF and congratulate the NRF for an amazing summit that we have held here at the University of Cape Town, having brought together so many people from different parts of the world, running a successful summit that is conducted in multiple languages in the same room. You're hearing English, you're hearing Portuguese, you're hearing Spanish, you're hearing French, you're hearing all these different languages. So I do think that it shows the progress that we are making, and I'm hoping in the future we can also bring in artificial intelligence to make things a lot easier in the process. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. We're still in the Global Open Access Summit in Cape Town.